Yeah, I haven't jumped on yet.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so it's recording anyway. So, okay, so the business that you have, when did you start it, or how did it all come about? Or tell me a bit about yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, so DreamWorks started because I had kind of backing up a little bit before then. I'd gone to college. I gotten a degree in interior design, so a bachelor's degree, got out of school, and right out of school had a job with a corporation, a big insurance company. Spent 3 years there, climbing the corporate ladder, did really well, got promotions and raises, and 3 years I stopped. I remember the day and said, this can't be it. This just does not feel right.
Wow.
And I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know anybody who was having that conversation with themselves or anyone else. And I decided to leave.
And what age were you at that stage?
I was probably about 28, maybe. No, I would have been, it was probably more like 25, around 25. Wow. Yeah. So I thought, well, this is a great job. So this is a great resume I have. So it'd be easy to just relocate and pick up a job like this someplace else. And that was not the case. It wasn't easy to pick up a job someplace else. So I really kind of drifted until I ended up back in design again, just because I had no idea what else I could possibly do. And so for several years, I had a few different design jobs. And then I was living with my partner, my fiance, and we were going to split up. And I sat down to figure out my finances, and I said, yeah, they don't pay us enough for me to actually live on my own. So I went in and talked to the owners of the company, and I said, you're not paying a living wage. You need to pay us more. And he basically said, yeah, we don't need to because, people in your position are willing to work for this wage. So wow. That was kind of the bottom line. And I said, well, then I'm leaving. I don't care where I have to go and what I have to do. I'm going to go find a way to support myself because, wow. I have a 4-year degree. So I ended up moving to Philadelphia, and I got a job that paid, and a few years into being there on the train into the city, the commuter train, I met my husband, the guy who would become my husband.
Oh, wow. Oh my
yeah. God. So we kind of moved in together. When we did, he had just gotten an offer for an assignment in London. So once we moved in together, then a few months after that, he turned it into an expatriate package. And so we got married and moved to London.
Wow. So, oh my God.
Yeah.
Whirlwind.
So right before I moved, I was ironing my clothes for work one night, and he said, "You're not. Once we get married, you don't have to work anymore." And I said, "Well, why would you say that?" And he said, "Because every Sunday, as you're ironing your clothes for work, you cry."
Oh
and
no!
I was like, "I do? Like I didn't have any idea that I even did that."
Oh wow!
And so I was like, yeah, okay, well, I knew I wasn't happy with design anyway. So this was like a great opportunity for me to kind of, spend some time thinking about it. What did I really want to do? Who did I really want to be? And so we went to London, and I've moved a lot in my life. So it was like, I'm amazing at packing, unpacking, settling us in. So within like a record time, we have a place to live. We're all unpacked. We're all moved in. And I remember this day very well, walking across the living room, and I said, uh-oh, I had never thought what was going to happen after I unpacked us. Like everything was such a whirlwind up till that moment.
Wow, yeah, the stress of it all kind of you just landed.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, what am I going to do all day? Like, I don't know anybody. We were far enough out of London that it wasn't like I was just going to wander around the city and museums all day. It was too much of a commute from there. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of lost, and I began just reading and a lot of fiction and just didn't really know what to do. And then I happened across to find Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, in
Oh yes, I think I know that. Well,
the bookstore.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think I would know one.
it's kind of a reignite your creativity kind of a thing. Not that I had any creativity, so I'm not quite sure I picked up the book, but it was one of those moments, those defining moments in life where your direction is going to shift. You don't know it until you look back.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
say,
yeah.
oh, that was a moment there.
Wow.
So she recommends, one of the things she recommends doing is writing 3 pages of stream of consciousness every day.
Mm,
So you're supposed to just write anything, like,
yeah.
you know, the fan is running, the dog is snoring, the car is beeping. So even if you have nothing to write. So I had nothing to write, day after day, nothing to write. And I was like, well, what is the point of this, right? To just write about the car horns honking or whatever. So I remembered a dream one morning. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a great way to fill up these morning pages, is to remember your dreams and just write those down. And then I started to wonder, like, what the heck? Like, what is this all about? What are dreams about? What are they for? And I didn't really pick up any books, but we were there for a couple of years. And then we moved back to Philadelphia. And I jumped right into graduate school. And I thought, I'm going to go for psychology because I've always been interested in psychology.
And at this stage, you weren't back working. You had stayed off working and you were kind of just still finding yourself. How long was that period
2 years.
for?
2 years in London.
Wow.
So we went back to Philly, and I jumped into that, found us a house in record time, got us packed, unpacked, moved. It's all done.
I'm surprised you're not a real estate agent, or you haven't dabbled in that world, or
Yeah, something, right? Or mover. I should just be a moving company.
yeah.
So so we get back there, and I'm still intrigued by the dreams. I probably was still writing them down at that point. I'm in graduate school in psychology, and I asked every single professor, well, what can you tell me about dreams? And no one could answer the question. And again, by the grace of God, or whatever you want to call it, the universe, somebody happened to come to this Catholic school that I went to and offered a weekend workshop on dreams.
No way.
And
wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised there wasn't any dream analysis by Freud. Didn't he do a whole thing on dream analysis? So in the college they didn't cover that.
Yeah, you know what? It's like a sentence in a book, that describes all of the major psychologists or psychiatrists kind of historically, but nothing really kind of got into it until this weekend. It was actually a 1 credit course. And I was that student in the class who cannot shut up. I had 1,000 questions and he had the answers. And I was just, oh my God.
And everybody else in the class was like, for God's sake, if she asked
a
question, like.
But it was like a magical key, and it opened the door. And it was so lucky because it was just a short class, and I don't think I ever read a book on it. I always was just like, the dreams are going to show me. And I just opened the door to it, and he gave me enough information that I could start interpreting.
Wow.
And I interpreted for several years every single dream I had every night, like 4 and 5 dreams a night after night. I was interpreting, and friends and family.
4 or 5 dreams a night every night.
Yes.
Really? You must have been eating a lot of cheese going to bed. Cheese gives you really bad dreams going to bed. My God.
Do they?
Wow.
So what kind of the beauty of it was that without any preconceived notions, I went in like just open, like, okay, what do you want to show me? What do I need to know? What do I need to clear? And so I have totally allowed the dreams to guide me it's been about 18 years now.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
So my breadth of understanding of the dreams, I've never seen anyone who has approached it. And there may be people out there that have, like, I'm not exposed to a lot of it because I'm satisfied with what I do. but the breadth of what is possible and contained in the dreams is unbelievable. It's like every single night, your higher self sends you information about every single aspect of your life every night. And because we typically don't think in symbolism,
Mm-hmm.
symbolism, I believe, is the language of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So the dreams are coming and speaking to your soul, not to your conscious mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're coming to give it information to wake it up. I mean, on every level, from health, diet, herbs. I mean, I would wake up and they would tell me I should be taking a particular herb, and I have no idea what it was, so I'd have to go look it up. Or I dream of a flower and I'd wake up and look it up, and I need that flower essence. Or
it's very interesting because, like, for years, like, I've always journaled. I've journaled since I could hold a pen in my hand. And I wouldn't always journal dreams, but when I wake up, I dream very, very vividly at times. And I seem to go through phases where I dream a lot. But when I dream, they're just crazy. My dreams are just like, they're madness, absolute madness. But what's very interesting is when I do go to write them down, at the time I'm like, oh, maybe this means that, and maybe this means that, but only until I write it down, I'm like, oh my God, would you look at that? Like, I'm writing it and I'm like, now I get it. And usually what I found is certain people aren't the people that they are in the dream. They actually represent a different person. And it's been very interesting through the years to see how somebody from my childhood actually represents somebody from my adulthood. And I would have never considered them to be the same person, but the characteristics were like on par. And I couldn't have done that in my waking self. My higher self, my subconscious, my unconscious has paralleled those energies. It's more to do with their energies. But yeah, symbolism, absolutely. Symbolism. And just to clarify for anybody that would be listening, symbolism can be, it's what I believe, it's whatever it is to that person. So symbolism for me might be people, places, things, colors. It to somebody else might be an object or shapes or sounds or textures or whatever. So it's going to be different for each person. Would that be fair to say?
yeah, that's my take on it as well. Also, there can be kind of a deeper level of meaning that is similar across people. So the kind of interesting thing about symbols is that it can be one thing today and another thing tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a big dream, you might have noticed that the symbols morph over time, or the people morph over the time, or the meaning of the dream does. So symbols are never kind of locked into anything. And because our literal, rational, day-to-day mind tends to look at things as like, okay, you can look it up in the dictionary and this is what it means.
Very linear and very fixed, whereas nothing in the universe is fixed. It's all completely mobile. Yeah, absolutely. And it's polarity as well. It changes. So yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so I definitely, the example I use when I teach is that if you have a dream of your childhood home and your home was lovely and, just idyllic, then that means one thing. But if you had a terrible upbringing and your childhood home was traumatic, I mean, it's an entirely, you can't look up childhood home in a dictionary and have it cover everything. So you're right. That's my take, is just from my perspective or your perspective or the dreamer's perspective. But in session, it's interesting because the other person's take on it can also add information, because it's a whole entirely new viewpoint that you aren't seeing from. So lots of times, like in a session when I'm doing it one-on-one, that really, I can add another layer of information too that's not seen.
There's like a collective conscious going on. So I do feel that there's your archetypal symbols, which I think Freud actually dips into, and a couple of other people dip into. So you've got or maybe it's Erickson, I don't know, I can't remember, but it's you've got your archetypes, but they change from nation to nation, from depending on what country you're from, depending on what background you're from, depending on what your religious aspects are. So they can be completely different, but there does tend to be the collective consciousness of mommy daddy symbols. Do you know what I mean? Like the major arcana of symbols, if you know what I mean, that you kind of work with. Because I know for me, I would dream of, say, like, just to give a couple of examples, if people were listening and you had a dream, there's a couple of your stereotypical ones which I would be familiar of, which is when you're dreaming of your home, it's usually to do with your security, to do with your boundaries, your comfort level. So for me, if I'm dreaming of my home where I grew up, where I grew up as a child, funnily enough, it doesn't always look like my home. And sometimes that home is a completely different home. But that depends on where my boundaries are at the time. It depends on how secure or safe I feel in myself and my life at the moment. So I know home is one. Teeth is apparently to do with wealth. I don't know what people losing your teeth is all about, wealth or finances or whatever. But that's another one. But yeah, is there any, if you were to give people a few ideas to play about with, if they were to wake up in the morning and have some dreams, are there some reasonably stereotypical ones you can give them clues on?
Well, just to make a comment about the teeth, because that's kind of a lot of people have that. And so the way that I approach dreams is from an embodied perspective. And so what that means to me is that I take the dream, in the very first place we go after I say kind of what are your general first impressions, is we go right into the body. And so especially with the teeth, it's a really good one, because the feeling that's associated with your teeth and having problems with your teeth falling out or whatever is what, do you have a sense of what that feeling was that was associated with that?
Oh, maybe fear or insecurity or something like that.
Yeah, what I've seen is helplessness.
Helplessness.
Like there's this sense of, oh my
gosh,
gosh,
it's falling out, how can I stop this? And they're crumbling and you're like, oh my God. Yeah.
And there is nothing you can do about it. So what we do is we, first of all, go into the emotion of it. So where does that feeling sit in your body? So we go start with the chakras and go from the lowest and work our way up.
Wow.
So if you say like that feeling is in the belly, then we go down there and we witness the sensation. That's it. We don't label it. We don't send it sparkles. We don't like turn it into butterflies and let it fly away. We sit with it like a child who's upset, and we just comfort and calm. And it's our own inner child who at some point historically felt that sense of helplessness in life, and no one was there to comfort or witness her. And so we imagine that child sitting on our lap, and we are the parent that wasn't there, that couldn't be there for them. And as we witness the emotion of helplessness and this sense that she felt in that situation that evoked that maybe the first time, we're transforming that consciousness just by witnessing it and allowing the emotion to flow and being with it.
Beautiful. I know when I do a lot of meditation and Reiki and reflexology and all this thing. I've also done a bit of hypnotherapy and psychotherapy. I'm one of these people who's done a little bit of everything, but in my own meditation work that I've adapted to take into account a bit of Reiki and just general energy work has been literally, as you were saying, which is very interesting, it's to literally sit with the body and to empty the mind of thoughts and to go into the feeling of the body and to feel where in your body, what do you feel in your body and where do you feel it? Like it could be, tingling in your big toe. It doesn't really matter. It's just, and it's not to engage in that. It's literally just to be passive in it and to just, as you say, exactly that, to just sit with it. And I remember sitting in meditation. I was in India and I was doing this meditation and this emotion just kept rushing and I was just doing a normal meditation and I was like, what is this? And I was like, okay, switch off the brain, Deb, switch off the brain. And it kept coming up and it kept coming up and I kept trying to open the space for it to come, and then I just sat bawling, crying for no reason. I was very contented and I was very happy, but my body was crying. And it was actually an incredibly therapeutic and cathartic moment. So what you're saying completely resonates with me, the fact that you're sitting in with the energy and where it is in your body. And I love that you're taking a dream, which turns into quite often a very logical thing. Oh, what did that mean? And I'm going to attach it to this storyline and this thing, but you're actually bringing it right back into the body and back into your spirit, really, which is really beautiful. It's lovely. Very nice. And you're doing something with it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And that's just the first level. So we kind of take it at that level of the emotion and allow the emotion to even evolve and change, as you say. So when we sit in stillness, it's like a pond, and all of this stuff that's in the pond floats to the surface. So that's kind of the way that I see what's happening when we sit with it and why we just sit with it. So I really try to work with my clients over time to build up their ability to sit, because lots of times, they'll be like, well, what am I supposed to be doing here? So as they begin to kind of get it, they become more comfortable with that sitting. And so once we feel the emotion either move from there to another place and witness it in the new place, or allow it to transform and resolve itself, then we go into the meaning of the dream. So what is the dream trying to convey? Because there's information that wants to come to consciousness. So once we get past that point of allowing and accepting, they can sometimes now trace it back to, and the emotion may trace it back to that seminal experience where that first started. And I liken it to like dominoes. So typically in life, it's like the first domino, and then subsequently throughout life, other dominoes will come right behind it in the same line as the energy of that initial experience. And so in my perception, that's what life is about. Life is us magnetizing those moments that align with that first experience.
Yeah.
In order to feel the emotion and resolve it. And then I say that clicks that first, that knocks that first domino down and the whole row falls. And that's where the real transformation comes in your life. And so you were asking earlier about archetypes. And one of the places that I really saw this was when I was working on my book. And I looked at the myth of Amor and Psyche, which is a part of another story, but took that myth and then saw subsequently the fairy tales that came after it. So when you say what are archetypes, you can look at a fairy tale, and you can look at, like, just say fairy tales in general. And what do we see? We see things like the good mother is no longer in the story. Like, if you think of the fairy tales, most of the fairy tales do not have a good mother. The Cinderella, Rapunzel, Snow White, the mother's gone. So if she is there, she's often silent or kind of just a background figure. Very rarely.
Very true. That's very true. Yeah. Very interesting. I've never actually noticed that before. Yeah.
So what we can see is, now this is on a cultural level. What we can see culturally is that the good mother has kind of disappeared from our narrative, as well as the divine feminine. And so what you can see is that what's taken its place as an initiatory figure is the negative mother. And she served and serves as the one who can do the wounding, along with, in this case, like, it's usually a passive father, or one who sacrifices his daughter. So you see those parallels in the culture, as our feminine has been devalued in the West, and also culturally, the father has not stood up for the feminine, has not stood up and protected her or valued her. And so that's, again, kind of at a more literal standpoint, but then symbolically, it's about the soul. And it's about kind of that loss of soul in our culture, which is clearly in the process of reemerging.
Oh, I'm so in love with what you're saying, more than you can realize, because that's actually a lot of why I'm doing this. It's a lot of why I'm doing this podcast. I couldn't have probably put it as eloquently as you have, but I do feel it's only in the last couple of years I've become very aware of mainstream media. And Disney has a lot to answer for, and mainstream media are celebrities and Hollywood and TV and shows and all this tripe that we're being constantly bombarded with. Like, we cannot escape it. We can't. It's either on our radio or on our TVs, and it's literally attacking all of our senses, and we don't know it. Look, unless we're able to become awake and aware of that happening, it's just going to go in, and it's not, you're never going to feel like it's affecting you, because it's just so subliminal. It's so subtle, and it's really destructive. And exactly as you're saying, like, I've noticed it from a current TV point of view, but maybe not from the Fairytales point of view. But you're absolutely spot on. Like, the divine feminine has been completely removed altogether. And yeah, absolutely, the storybook fathers are either really aggressive, really mean to their daughters specifically, tend to leave them in a wood somewhere with some breadcrumbs, or sends them off to their really nasty auntie's house, who's some sort of a weird demonic witch, like, so it's, that's incredible. And we are being bombarded with it, and that's what this podcast is about. It's about bringing back real life into people's eardrums and into their eyes and into their world. And it's about nurturing and nourishing their soul, and just getting them back in contact, making people aware that that's been missing, so that they can then make their own decisions and widen their perspectives and allow it into their life if they want to. And if they're not ready for that and it's not their time, that's their journey, and they're entitled to that as well. But it's just about giving them that information. I love what you've just said, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so the perspective that I take on this, after working with the dreams and with the fairy tales, is that, again, what's happened is our culture, because most things associated with the masculine are elevated, the things with the feminine have been repressed for a long time. The symbolic language is the language of the feminine, because it's the language of the soul. What's happened is the perspective on the fairy tale has been one of coming from the mind. So we look at it literally. So they say, especially what I've heard as a feminist point of view, is that the girl is passive. She's sitting around waiting for the handsome prince to show up and rescue her. But if you look at it symbolically, and like I would a dream, what I would say is that when she's sitting and passively waiting, is you sitting on your mat in India meditating. And that's the time, the period of the inner work. And if you look at the story symbolically, what you begin to see is the whole pattern and the path. And so this is a collective, like if we take something like Cinderella, we can say this is a collective story, an archetypal story, and it's a personal story. So I personally had, my mother was not the good mother, my personal mother, and I was living the Cinderella story, cooking, cleaning. My mother was divorced, so I did it. So I literally lived it out. So when I go back and look at that story symbolically, I can see exactly what I need to clear in myself in order to let the soul free. So the princess is a heroine, and the wounding, if you want to call it that, is actually the wounds that set up the initiation of awakening.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we could say ideally, oh, it would be great if we all lived these little fantasy lives with mothers who are good, and we live, but the awakening is triggered by the wounding. Completely. So the father had to be passive, the mother had to be aggressive, or the girl had to end up, if you look at like Cinderella, the stepsisters are not initiated. The stepsisters are not. It's Cinderella that's initiated. She's the one that becomes the queen. She's the one that awakens, not the other ones. So we've kind of taken a literal viewpoint of it. The same thing in terms of the divine feminine. The divine feminine, we believe, oh my gosh, she's totally been wiped out. But when I was working on my dissertation, I was intuitively guided to the Bible. And I did not grow up with a religious background. My mother was into New Age belief systems, so we had nothing, didn't believe in actually organized religion. So I started having these phrases come to me from out of the Bible. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And I was like, so I go and get my Bible that I got when I was 13, and I'm like flipping through it. Okay, why do I keep getting this information? And I look at it and it says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, and it was all good. And he, created Adam and Eve, and he created man in his image, male and female. He created them and put them in the Garden of Eden. And then Adam says he's lonely. And I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean? You created him in our image, male and female. He created them and put them in the garden. Well, how did he end up being lonely if they were there? Like, where'd she go?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And so then I happened across this story synchronistically about Lilith, who was there in the beginning before Eve. She refused to be subservient to Adam. And she left the garden.
No way, get out. Where did you read this?
In my dissertation, that little story gets put back into the story.
Wow.
Yeah. Then she leaves. Then Eve is created. And God takes Eve creates it from Adam's rib when he is asleep, read unconscious, and calls her Eve, his helper. That's what it says in my Bible. His helper. I'm like, his helper? Well, that kind of makes sense.
I've never heard
Lilith
that before.
refused.
Wow. I know that Lilith is an astrological term also.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they've demonized her. They say she's a demon, and she's like having, So the church did, but supposedly there's a story, and it's based on the Jewish tradition.
Wow.
Somewhere along the line. Yeah. And then if you look at Proverbs, which is where Sophia is, and Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom, which is where you get philosophy, lovers of Sophia.
Wow. Oh,
and so if you look in Proverbs, you'll see it says, I was there at the beginning before God laid the foundations of the earth. And so I take that and I move that to the beginning of the story.
Wow.
It says she's God's consort. Yes.
Because there's a book called The Sophia Codes. Have you heard about the Sophia Codes?
Yeah.
I haven't read it. I've read some of it, but not all of it. And I've been going through my own little spiritual wobble over the last while where I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Am I believing the right thing? And then I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to read this. And then I read this and I'm like, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean? Like I know, and I come back to myself and it's just pure speed wobble, but or spiritual wobble. But that's interesting. So the Sophia Codes coming from Sophia is actually part of the beginning of the story as well. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. That particular book, I have it too, and I think I read a little bit of it a long time ago, but I haven't finished it. Or I'm not that familiar with it. I know of the title.
Yeah.
I just believe that the divine feminine is here and has been here. It's just a matter of we haven't seen it. So what I did in my dissertation was I just went through, and when I looked at the stories through a symbolic lens, what I discovered was what we have been told isn't true. And when I tell people the symbolic viewpoint, they're like, well, that makes total sense. So if you look at a story of Lot's wife, are you familiar with that?
No.
She's nuts. They're supposed to be leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, and she's not allowed to turn around as they're leaving, and she defies God's rule, and she turns around and she's turned into a pillar of salt
Oh,
as
yes, I have heard
punishment.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the stories that happened to come up when I was working on my dissertation. And I'm like, okay, so she's turned into a pillar of salt. So first of all, when you read the whole story, yeah, we never heard the whole story. So if you look and read it, you're like, okay, yeah, so yeah, well, that's kind of shady and that's kind of not so great, but I'll set that aside for the moment. So I'm like, she's turns around and looks back. Well, if you look again in the fairy tales and myths, actually seeing something is really important. It happens over and over and over again. So that is the first thing that kind of piqued my curiosity, like, well, that's always a good thing. So I'm going to set that aside, like that, maybe that was a good thing and not a bad thing. And then I thought, okay, so she's turned into a pillar. A pillar in a building is kind of an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And a pillar in the community
Yes.
is also someone who's really upright and upstanding. And salt is a substance that's salt of the earth.
Yeah.
You need it for life. And also in alchemy, it's considered a permanent substance. So when you're talking about God is, and when you talk about the real and the unreal, and the permanent and the impermanent, salt is the permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you take, salt water and the water evaporates, the salt remains. So I'm like, okay, so those two things kind of are an indication that, maybe we got it wrong. That she might have turned around and looked and like, maybe she's enlightened now.
Yeah, wow, what a take.
Instead of punished. And then I was synchronistically guided to the Nag Hammadi, where the Gnostics call Sophia a pillar of salt.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Wow. That's fascinating.
So we've been told, we know the story, we've been told the story, but we've
the lens has been skewed. And that's another thing. Like I remember with the Bible, like I grew up Catholic, Christian, whatever you want to call it, and kind of just only ever took to it, like only ever kept it because I was afraid that God was so damning. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to believe in him until I figure it out, like, but yeah, I like it's the lens by which we've been fed this story, I think, is probably the biggest problem. Even with the Bible, like I think the way I look at the Bible is it's a collection of stories written down by men. That's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's like humans can make mistakes. They have their own perspectives and perceptions. They could have had it wrong. They're just stories. And it depends on what way we're taking those stories and how we're glorifying those stories. And if we're being told in a church or somewhere by a priest or a minister or whoever it is telling us these stories, this is this story and this is what it means, then we don't question it until, what you're talking about, it's like, no, question it, because if you cross-reference it with other things, then you'll realize it has a completely different meaning to it. Wow, isn't that beautiful?
So the way I like to look at the fairy tales is, if you think about it, we've taken them again from a literal perspective, but if you went back and you said, okay, I have this story of initiation and awakening, I'm going to carry it from way back when through hundreds of years. How can I do that without the authorities realizing what story I'm telling?
What do you mean by that now? Sorry.
Well, so if you were going to talk about taking your power back, from a religious perspective, at certain times in history, those who deviated from the norm met with terrible fates.
Yes. Yeah.
But let's just say, symbolically encoded in these fairy tales was the path of awakening. And so you hand it down from generation to generation orally. The authorities think it's nonsense. They think it's nonsensical. It slides right under their noses century after century and comes down to us. And now we've been given these stories that have come to us from hundreds of years ago, basically unchanged. And we have to ask ourselves why. why has those stories that are supposed, we're interpreting as really nonsense and not and negative and derogatory. If that was the case, why on earth would they have lasted for hundreds of years?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a lovely question. Yeah.
So I think it's because it was to help us. So it's a gift. It was a gift to us. And this is how the universe managed to get it through the filters. And so what happens is, again, like a dream. So what happens is they're telling these stories, and on a subconscious level, they're getting the story of awakening for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, maybe that nugget for the soul to just keep it going a little bit longer or whatever. And so you think about it, like when this virus came up that's happening now, I said to my partner, I said, look, we are the ones that have survived for thousands of years in this planet. We have like the strongest DNA and the healthiest genes out of anybody to put us here, after all this time. Like, we're pretty incredible beings if you think about it from that standpoint. Like,
absolutely. Give us some credit, give the virus some credit and give us some credit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So what's the next stage then with your clients? What would you do from kind of that? So you bring them through the fairy tale concept, and what would you do kind of from there? What's the normal transition?
Well, I like to make it practical. So when we talk about the dominoes, right, going back to the initial domino and then subsequently, so the dreams are going to tell us what's happening in the subconscious level and then what needs to come in. And so this is a point that I've really started to hone in on more recently, is what is it, and I think, and when I was looking at your website, I think it's like the old narrative, right? Having to kind of fall away. And then, or this is like Lot's wife. She looks and she witnesses at the crumbling. So the crumbling of the city, the destruction of the city is the description of the narrative that we've been handed by the culture. Mm-hmm. So we are witnessing this right now.
Yeah,
we are in the midst of it.
Yeah.
This crumbling of the structure that we have been standing on. So I believe that what's happening is, so anything in the material world, anything that's in the impermanent is what's falling away to reveal that which is permanent, and that becomes the new foundation. So what the dreams do is, besides kind of giving you information about everything from past lives to present lives to relationships to your health to your diet, whatever, they're going to tell you what's taking its place. So for example, that I have this dream, and in the dream there's a state, which is the state I was born in. And there's a guy standing on it. It's this big map on the floor, and he's standing beside the city I was born in. I'm like, yeah, that's where I was born. I was born right there. And I'm all excited about this for some irrational reason. And I start to walk away, and this other guy walks up to me, and he takes a solar eclipse, and he throws it, and it goes right into my third eye. And I was like, wow. So the next day I look it up online, like, okay, so third eye, there's a chakra, which I've also dreamt about, in the back of the head. That is the chakra of rebirth. So the dream is telling me, no, your idea of being born into this world is not true. It's too limited of a perspective. So this is the seat of rebirth. And so if you look at the chakras, that's what they tell you. And what I learned through my dreams and through intuition is that the body contains doorways. Mm-hmm. And so we can meditate on those and learn about them. And so the dreams will also reveal them and show information about them. So they're saying, like, basically your ideas are too limited. And so wherever I'm limited in something, they want to expand that and reveal more truth to be embodied. So the dreams are also giving us that next step. They're also showing us the new earth. They're also showing us the new paradigms. and the new patterns that we need to be living. I don't know if pattern's really the right word, because I tend to see us as coming out of patterns.
Yeah, I would
And
agree. Yeah.
People say, like, you know, what about the fairy tale happily ever after? And so my sense of it is that the story is done. The old stories are done. And so because we're creating something new
Yes.
that hasn't been here before, we no longer have these narratives from history that we're carrying with us anymore, but it's about opening to the soul and the heart, whatever you want to call it, spirit, in order to receive what's next, what's coming. And at one point I asked, you know, my guides, I said, about the feminine, I was like, you know, we need models, we need role models for the feminine. And they said, this is not a time of role models. This is a time of going in and like just allowing what can happen to be expressed and to be embodied and to give, you know, come forth through you.
I totally agree. And I actually feel that that's exactly where we're at as well. I feel like the old, like when you think about fairy tales and we kind of think about the old traditions, like I love the old traditions, absolutely love it. But I know that I have to release them as well, because it's kind of, there's a slightly stagnant energy attached to all of it, or kind of, it's not, when I say dark, I don't mean dark as in it's evil, but as in it's heavy, and it's a heavy old traditional energy. I love the woodlands, it's the same kind of thing, and everything is becoming lighter and everything is shifting. And I do feel that moving into this new earth that we're moving into, this new time, this new phase, like in the age of Aquarius, whatever people want to call it, it's so new. It's so new that we have, and our little human brains are just ill-equipped at this very minute to just imagine and perceive what's coming, because it's going to be so amazing and so brilliant. And I know that's really hard for people at the moment, because for anybody who has no idea what we're talking about, it'll make sense very soon, but it's a big transitional period for people. And with that, it's like a baby being born. You know, you're in the womb and it's an old space, and then there's the horrible pain. A baby has to go through a lot of pain while it's being born, a lot of discomfort, should I say, going through that birth canal. And then it comes out into the new world as a brand new human being that walks and talks and moves about the planet and smells and has all these senses. And I kind of feel that that's where we're coming from. So we have these old stories, and I kind of wonder if, you know, God, the universe, source, whatever, has kind of gone, do you know what, they're really just not getting it. Like, you know, we've had these fairy tales for years, they haven't really clicked into it, so we now just need to change it up. So just cut off the old stuff, bring in the new stuff, and we'll start again. And that's a little bit of my perspective as to what's happening. So I agree.
Yeah, the fairy tales hinted at it a little bit. There was a little, like if you look at Beauty and the Beast, you know, she goes into the castle, and the castle, like all these little invisible beings are kind of fulfilling her desires. And so there are hints of it. And he really is all about her becoming empowered and accepting abundance and accepting that she doesn't need to work for it. And so it does, the fairy tales do hint at coming into a more empowered position in terms of what's possible. So you see a little bit in Hansel and Gretel as well. A little bit of that kind of, like, because the witch has all the gifts and she has all the riches. So, you know, there are hints of it in what needs to happen in order to step into, to prepare us to step into the new paradigms, is a bit of how I see that as well.
So if somebody, you know, wanted to work with their dreams, because I've done a little bit of dream work, it sounds easier than it is. It takes a bit of practice to get into it. I was actually doing it in Colombia using master plants and all that kind of thing. So it was maybe a little bit easier because of that, because I had the tools to go with it. But if you wanted to engage more with your dreams, if you wanted to create, if you wanted to go to bed tonight and have a dream, because sometimes we go to bed and we don't have dreams. Sometimes we go to bed and we have intense dreams. Other times we have recurring dreams. So what do you feel is the reasoning behind no dreams, recurring dreams, really strong, vivid dreams, and how can we navigate them, or how do you feel that we can navigate them? Because we can, it's just, it takes practice.
Yeah. So typically, there's several things can be happening. So if you're used to not listening and you kind of dismiss them, then I think dreams are random. Sometimes they don't come because people are out of balance. And I think their daytime life is too overwhelming. So what you notice is when the virus came and everybody was forced to stay at home, the dreams started increasing for people.
Yeah.
Because I think that we're too busy and distracted kind of by life most of the time that we don't listen. And the dreams don't want to overwhelm us with even more content. But oftentimes when they do break through, they can break through because something is important. So what I often suggest is, because like you said, it can be kind of complex to learn. So when I work with people, I try to work on a longer time frame basis, because the way that I work is about empowerment. So when people come to work with me, I want them to walk away and say, okay, I can keep doing this. I now have a practice. I now know how to approach this and how to do this on my own, because that's really what it is. It's really about kind of partnering with our dream source in order to get through life in a way that we can be healthy and live on purpose. So what I try to talk about with people, if I'm not working directly with them, is to start with the emotion of it. So to really just bring it down into the body and feel where it is, because this practice is also can just be daily life. So if you're not remembering your dreams, you can use intention to remember and say, I'm going to remember. Before you go to sleep at night, put a pad beside your bed. But to begin to work with them is really just to notice them, and you can just witness them. And that's enough, if that's all you can do, to actually begin to work with them and transform them, to just be with the emotion of it. If you can, you could sit with the symbols of it and say, what is this saying? If you can sit quietly and wait for a response. The more you're able to do that, the more the information will come forward. So it's like everything has, whether it's an experience, a direct experience with someone that you had day to day that is out of the ordinary, that evoked some kind of emotion, or whether it's a dream, if you can just sit with something and just be with it, then oftentimes the wisdom in it will just come to the surface, like you said, when you meditated. So there are ways that you can do these things just to start and get yourself going. And then just ask yourself, what does this mean to me? What does this symbol mean specifically to me? So my childhood home, my aunt, Delilah, my, this flower, this whatever. You can just begin to really look at it and say, what does this mean to me? And as you said, journaling is an amazing way to get through things. And you could just really, even like I was talking about before, the stream of consciousness, you could really just put the dream there and just write whatever comes into mind, and you'll be amazed at
it actually just starts to kind of unfold. You write. Literally what I do is I just write exactly what I saw in the dream. I just write the details of it as much as I can humanly possible. It doesn't even have to make sense. It's like, oh, I saw a pink ball, and then I saw, whatever, a tree, and just keep writing it. But then by the time you get to the end of it, what I find, which is so smart, as I said, our higher selves are just, they're so intelligent, and it's literally, it's come out in the correct way on the page even. So you don't even have to try. All you have to do is just write what you're thinking, and your higher self is already giving you the sequence of what you need to remember in the sequence that you need to make sense of it. So you could start at the end of your dream, go to the middle, and then finish up somewhere at the start, and it will still make sense the way it's supposed to make sense for you. It's just incredible. I find personally that way just to be really helpful. The other thing I also find is, and what we did when we were in Colombia with the dream therapy, or you basically, when you're going to bed, you invite the fact that you're going to have a dream, exactly as you say, because you're putting intention on it, and attention is drawing it to you. So that's the first part. The second part, they say, and which is what we did, was to go, just before you go to sleep, to go through your day in reverse. So walk backwards through your day. And so what you're doing is you're decluttering what you did in the day out of your mind. And then it means that your mind is really getting to work. It's giving you the good stuff. So your dreams are not being wasted on, I put a glass on the table and I drank water. It's more subconscious and it gets to the good stuff as such. Or at least that's kind of what worked for me. But it was also very interesting to realize we have several REM cycles every night. And they get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And actually, by the time you wake up in the morning and have that really vivid dream that you've woken up and you're like, wow, it was really vivid and it seemed like it was really long, the chances are it was probably either the shortest of your dreams, which it is at the end, or what you're thinking is been several different dreams all memoried together at the same time. So you wake up thinking, God, that was a really long dream, but you're actually cutting and pasting them all together, which is just, it's just fascinating. I love the world of dream. It really is fascinating.
Yeah. So one of the other interesting things that I've noticed is when you wake up, if you pay attention to what you're thinking as you begin your day. So as you get into the shower, you're making your coffee, your mind's kind of wandering around. And what I noticed was that the mind's wandering was actually related to the dreams. Mm-hmm. And so it was giving me like context. So the dream would be symbolic, but what my mind was running through was maybe a song that just popped into my head, yeah, or some memory of something that had happened in the past couple of days. And if it was enough to kind of, for me to remember it, then I would notice later when I worked on the dream, I'd be like, holy cow, like I totally was thinking this already when I got on the shower. So
it's incredible.
It is. I mean, I have never, ever waned on my amazement with the dreams. They're just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So tell me this, if people wanted to work with you directly, how would they work with you and what's the best way of contacting you? Or you've got a website, Facebook page?
Yeah, everything I do is under Wisdom of the Swan. So I have a blog, website, everything or Facebook page it's all Wisdom of the Swan. And I work with people on Skype and just, typically try for 3 to 6 months I've kind of tried to be a little bit more flexible with the virus, and people's, are a little bit more challenged financially right now. But it's really about developing a practice, because what happens is if people come in for one session, they're like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I talk to them 6 months later and they're like, I'm still working on that dream. I'm like, okay. So what we need to do is kind of, that's when I decided, like, I've got to help people to understand, like, that they bring the big dream. Mm-hmm. That's often what brings them in, but that week after week, the dreams are helping them to get there. Mm-hmm. And they're assisting them step by step in achieving that embodiment of that.
And you're building a relationship with your higher self. You're building a relationship with your dreams, because really we don't engage with them very often. We just see them as something that comes and goes. So I find the same thing as with Reiki. I practice Reiki. And when I'm doing, or, distance Reiki, or, clients who are with me personally, it's great to come for one session and you leave and you'll feel like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I can't believe I feel this way. But really you need, like for Reiki, you need really 3 to 5 sessions. You need really at least 5 sessions. And sometimes I think that that's seen as a sales or marketing tool. It's like, come back for more so I can take more of your money, when in actual fact, it's not. It's like the first session is like, wow, because it's so new and it's so different. But what actually really happens over the next couple of sessions is, like with Reiki, you're building, you're connecting in, and you're building a relationship with your own energy field, and you're actually bringing yourself back into balance. And so what you want to do is come back into balance from this to this, and then, go do your thing, come back once every few weeks, once every few months, once every few years, as long as you're in here and not like this. So with the dreams, it's such an unconscious thing that, yes, I can totally see why you'd need to do it over a period of months, because weeks is going to be, you might have 3 dreams in 3 months. You're not going to, but you know what I mean? It's a longer period of time to get a relationship going with that.
Well, when you're working with them in an ongoing way, when you commit to that, usually you're having the dreams. They're gonna, because
It's
your
intentional.
dreaming source, they want you to be there. They want you to, I mean, like, I can't tell you how often I'll meet somebody totally random, like out of the blue. And they'll be like, I can't believe I'm meeting you today. I just had this dream last night. And I say, your higher self knew that you were going to meet me today. And they knew that you were going to find out what this dream meant. So they gave it to you specifically because they knew that I would tell you and the gist of what it was.
Wow.
So for sure, it's, you know, you really see when you work with this stuff how just magical life is. It really is. It just totally changes your worldview for sure.
Totally. I had my last partner. I went and did ayahuasca. I was at an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, and I actually had an ayahuasca dream after the ceremony, and I actually saw, he was my travel agent. We had no relationship at the time, and I remember seeing my travel agent in this dream basically handed in, you know, all of his clients over to his colleagues and was like, oh, I'm heading off to Malaysia to meet Deborah for 3 weeks. I'm going on holiday. And I remember thinking, this is strange. This is my travel agent. And I kid you not, we actually ended up meeting in Malaysia for a 3-week first date together. It was crazy, but that's what our dreams do. It's our higher self showing us. And it's incredible. It really is incredible. So if you mentioned you had a book as well, so what's the name of your book and where can people get their hands on it? Because it actually sounds really interesting.
Thank you. It's Initiation of the Soul, and I put it right here so I could show you. And of course, now it's underneath a pile of stuff. Here it is. Is it backwards?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah, I can see it. Initiation of the Soul by Pamela Alexander. Great. And that's your artwork on the front as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you've done, your artwork is lovely. I had a look at it as well. It's really, really beautiful.
Thank you. That came from the dreams. I
Wow.
had, when I was living in London, had nothing to do. The dreams, I started dreaming of being in art classes, and I couldn't understand why, because I had no talent. And I was like, that's kind of bizarre that I would be in all these art classes. So when we moved back to the States, I thought, well, in conjunction with being in graduate school, it would be perfect to take a few art classes for balance. So I would go into the class and I would quit. And then I'd take another one and I'd take a few times and then I'd quit. And then I was like, finally to a teacher, I said, I don't know what's wrong with me, why I keep quitting these classes. I said, will you work with me? I said, I may end up sitting in the corner crying, but I said, you know, will you kind of help me get through this? And she said, yeah, because we had kind of a close relationship. And so I was getting ready to quit again. I could see, I woke up in the morning like, oh, I don't think I'm going to go tomorrow. And that night I had a dream. And the dream said, if you don't go back tomorrow, the teacher isn't going to be there anymore. And I was like, oh, I guess I better go. So the next day I went. Now the week before when I'd had class, my drawing of this woman looked like Gumby. She was very thin and strong, like did not look like a human being at all. And so on this day, I drew this woman and it was incredible. Everybody's like, how did you do that? Like, how is that possible that last week you couldn't draw and this week you can draw this? There was a guy with a master's degree in fine art, and he came over and he's like, my work is totally overdone. Your work is so clear and simplistic and just beautiful. The lines are. So if I hadn't had those dreams, I never would have even thought of taking art classes.
Wow. Fantastic. Yeah. You're very multi-talented, and it really seems like you've found, it totally seems like you found your thing, which is just, it's beautiful. It's lovely that you're doing your thing, a soulpreneur. But yeah.
I love that. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this up here. And if you want to, is there anything that you would like, a message of your own that you would like other women to know to kind of summarize everything that you're doing or what you stand for or your own intrepid wisdom?
Yeah, you know what keeps coming to me as we talk, and one of the things that really came through the dreams and through the book of Fairytales is that it can appear as though we are victims, and we are victims of whatever has happened to us. And when I was going to first write this book, I was in graduate school and was going to look at some fairy tales because I saw the father was sacrificing the daughter over and over again. And that was the paper topic. It was going to be my paper subject. And I got an intuition, and it said, it's not a sacrifice by the father, it's an initiation by the mother. And I was like, we aren't victims. And so over and over again, from dreams that prepare us for the deaths of our loved ones, to the stories, to the religion, everything is showing us the way. And really, life is on our side. And the more that we recondition ourselves to understanding that we're not victims, it really empowers us to create this new earth and live in it. And we're, you and your generation are so inspiring to me. I love working with you guys because I can say whatever I want. You guys totally are open-minded, and this stuff that would blow away older generations to be like, what? You guys are like, yes, yes, yes. So we are going to do this. We are so going to do this together. We really can. We can really pull this out. I'm just so confident and so excited, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I'm so lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's been amazing. I feel really blessed because since I started this project, which is like very recently, I've been really blessed. There's been so many really very inspirational women who are just pouring into my Facebook and my WhatsApp and my Instagram, and I'm like, oh my God, where are all these people coming from? But it's incredible. It's really incredible. And I've just written a book myself, and part of it is very much about understanding that everything in life, it's a signpost, and the signpost is facing back to ourselves. And ultimately back to where we came from, and that's all it is. And it's just to be alert and awake to that, and I love that. It's been so lovely talking to you. It's been really, really nice. So if people want to check you out, yeah, definitely head on over, like your Facebook page, your website, and definitely buy your book. And yeah, it'd be lovely to stay in contact as well. I'd love to hear how things progress, because it sounds like something that's going to morph and grow, and yeah, wow.
You too. I'd love to stay in contact. Best wishes to you on this. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.